didn't realize you two were actually thinking so far ahead, Iluna says, now appearing to have calmed down. Well, why wouldn't we, I say. We are trying to kill a god, aren't we? Yes, Iluna says, I suppose we are. And the fact that we seem to be getting realistically closer to this goal makes me doubt my own sanity more and more with every passing day. Ha, Araka says, you ain't seen nothing yet. Stick with me and soon killing a few gods will feel like an ordinary afternoon. Hey Hadric, I'd tell the dwarf as he's passing by me, looking just as puzzled as Luna in the beginning. Pour me a glass of ale, would you? I just cast my first fire arrow. See that scorch mark over there on the tree? That was me. Good for you, man, Hadric says as he pats me on the back, very unconvinced. Good for you. Soon after, Hadric takes out a glass and Diane joins us as well, and then Kate and Darren also head over to see what the commotion was about. It took me some time to explain to them why casting this insignificant spell was such a big deal for me, to convince them that I hadn't completely taken leave of my senses when I agreed to smash my head again. Oh, so that's what... So I did comment on it at first, but I suppose from their perspective, like, it would just seem insane. Like, what the hell is he even doing? And we don't have points in toughness. We do have points in strength, but we don't have points in toughness. So it might look even more insane. That I haven't completely taken leave of my senses when I agreed to smash my head against a tree for a whole hour. But once I cleared up everything, we all sat down in a circle and enjoyed the rest of our evening, taking a brief rest from all our training. So Barry, now that you can cast any spell you want without any limitation, what are you planning to try next? Flower asks me, as she suddenly tries to pick up a bottle of dwarven ale, but then her eyes briefly turn blue and she slaps her own hand away from the bottle. If you want some suggestions, I highly recommend the spell where you make a huge dragon come out of the flames, that you can use to... I doubt that's how it works, Iluna interrupts. You might not be limited by the list of spells provided by this device anymore, but the magical power level is still very low. This means I can only be able to cast very weak spells for the time being. Exactly, Araka says. See, this is why the spells made by me are so great compared to the ones created by all the other simpletons. With my original spells, you are not limited by the amount of energy that you have at your disposal. You can make the spells as strong as weak as you want, depending on how much energy you want to spend on them. Also, they were all using fixed spells. Oh, that's what it is. I didn't even realize that. A fixed spell would be if you played what's it called? Skyrim. Let's say Skyrim. Okay, if you played Skyrim and if you were playing the mage class, you would notice that fireball spell and all the I think ignite is the weakest one, and then there's fireball, or other way around, whatever it is. There's a certain amount of magicka that is consumed when you use it, and that's the amount of magicka that will always be used. So let's say you can't use, let's say ignite is the weakest one and the fireball is the stronger one. I don't remember, but you cannot low cast. In D&D you can do this. You can upcast certain spells to increase their strength. I don't know if you can low cast them or something, but you can increase their strength by upcasting. So this is so interesting. You can make the spells as strong or as weak as you want, depending on how much energy you want to spend on them. Now, you're beginning to sound like a salesperson that is trying much too hard to sell their faulty products, Iluna says. We only just saw that the fire arrow that Barry cast works the same way, so clearly your spells are not as unique as you're making them out to be. Arka says, fire arrow doesn't count. That's one of the newer spells. Show me a spell from before 5,000 years ago that does what my spell do, then we'll talk. Oh, that makes sense, right? So the older spells, they had even less knowledge of magic, so they would probably use even more restricted spell. Then we'll talk. Anyway, I say, to answer Flower's question, I suppose, that what I'd want to try out first are some spells with easier flows to recreate so that I can get more practice before I begin with the complicated ones. I'd probably start with something like the frog summoning spell from the beginner's guide to summoning magic. Or maybe the floating dagger spell that those scam artists like to use when they pretend to be juggling. Or I could try the one spell where you can make little sparks fly in the air, like tiny fireworks. Or here's an idea, Arka says. How about you try out a spell that isn't completely useless? What does that even mean? Decide to try out a spell that isn't useless? Let me save. I guess I'll try that. Alright, Arka, you've convinced me, I say. The first spell I will try out will be an illusion spell of a tiny dunce hat that I can put on top of your amulet. That is a lot of effort you seem to be willing to spend just to mildly annoy me, Araka said. Despite its name, the tiny dunce hat illusion you're trying to cast has a much more complicated flow than most spells at that level. Well, if casting the spell proves to be too hard for me, I could always just bang my head against your amulet for 2 hours until it works, I say. It would be part of my training, so I'm sure you wouldn't mind, right? Hey, if that's how you want to spend the rest of your evening, be my guest, Araka says. I will never say no to watching people inflict pain on themselves out of sheer stupidity. So are we going to see a demonstration of your new spell, Barry? Diane asks me. After all, there's no better opportunity to flaunt your magical skills than in front of an audience. I'm going to need some time to practice before I can show it to anyone, I say, but if you want to see some magic, I could always cast the flash of light again. No, Darren, Kate, and Luna all shout in unison. Dear gods, not the light flash again, Kate says. Haven't you had enough? Look, I know that you all hate it, I say, but it's important for our timing to be perfect. If we want to use this in battle effectively, as soon as I say the code word, Darren catch, you will all need to close your eyes for exactly 1 second, no matter, it's a flashbang, no matter what you're doing on the battlefield, or else you'll get blinded along with the enemy. This is an very old spell that they don't really teach anymore nowadays, so most people won't be expecting it the first time when I use it against them. That's why it's necessary for us to do it well from the very first try before we lose the element of surprise. Listen, Barry, Hendrik says, I get that you're really excited about finally obtaining your magical stats, but it feels like this is the only thing you've been talking about for 2 days straight. Maybe it wouldn't be such a bad idea to forget about your magic for an hour or two and do something else for a change. Come on, Hardrick, don't be like that, Darren says. Let Barry have his moment. This man has been dreaming of becoming a mage his entire life. It's perfectly fine for him to not get a little overexcited. It's not like we mind, with the exception of his blinding light spell. That one is admittedly getting a little obnoxious. Maybe Barry could show off some of the other spells that he learned today, and says, how about it? I say, today I've been really busy with finding spell combinations and banging my head against the tree, so I can't say that I've tested that many spells compared to yesterday. Oh, I suppose I did cast a dizziness spell on Hardrick earlier, but he only let me do it once before he got bored and left. You have a dizziness spell? Kate says, surprised. At level 1? A very weak one, but it can still technically be classified as a dizziness spell. Yes, I say. It makes you feel slightly lightheaded for a few seconds. A very weak one, but it can still technically be classified as a dizziness spell. Yes, I say. It makes you feel slightly lightheaded for a few seconds. Obviously, I wasn't expecting you to have access to Wolford's Days at your first level of magical knowledge, Kate says, but I wasn't aware that there were any dizziness spells that could be cast with the little amount of magical energy you have at your disposal. Hey, now that you mention it, I think I did have access to Wolford's Days when I was fighting Tyrant, I say. That being said, who knows if I'll ever reach a level as high as that on my magical stat again. One can only hope. What is Wolford's Days? Flower asks. I've never heard of it before. Wolford's Days, Kate says, it is widely considered to be simultaneously the strongest and weakest dizziness spell that exists. There is essentially no magical counter or protection against it, but its effects can easily be rendered useless through non-magical means. All you need to do is focus your eyes on 3 different places in front of you within the span of 5 seconds, and the spell will be cancelled. But if you don't do that, you will get a headache the likes of which you have probably never had to experience in your lifetime. The main drawback is that the spell is incredibly difficult to learn, and most people won't bother to spend so much time practicing something that can easily be countered by a regular person with no magic just by looking around a little. You know, I say, it would really help me out if you guys allowed me to cast some of these targeted spells on you once or twice, just so that I could get a feel of how they work before using them in combat. I know you don't really like the idea, but I mean, I'm sorry, Barry, Kate says. He should have tapped his fingers against his fingers and raised his hand a little bit above his face, right below his face. That would have been perfect. I do mean no harm, and I value your friendship, but simply the thought of being experimented on again after what I went through at the beacon as a child I'm just not very keen on repeating that experience. No, that is totally understandable, I say. My bad. I should have thought about this before making that request. As for me, Darren says, The main problem is that many of my protection spells have limited uses per day, so I'd rather not cancel them unless it's absolutely necessary. And casting your spells on me while my protections are still up wouldn't really be of much help to you because you wouldn't know if they worked or not. It would still help me a little to cast them on you even with your protections active, but I get your point, I say. Betty, I didn't know you were in need of a test subject answers. I'd love to help.